Good evening. First of all, thank you all for joining us and for your service to Scouting and your love of Scouting, and for joining us in this important discussion. As you are aware, back in February, the National Board passed a resolution that set in motion a review of the BSA's membership standards. Through this process, Scouting embarked on the most comprehensive listening exercise that we've ever undertaken, and we gathered perspectives from both inside and outside of the Scouting family. This review confirmed that this issue remains one of the most complex and challenging issues facing the BSA and society as a whole today. Even with this wide range of input that we received, it was extremely difficult to accurately quantify the potential impact of maintaining or if we change the current policy. Last week, you should have all received a communication from me on behalf of the National Executive Committee that included the proposed resolution that the National Executive Committee had developed, as well as an executive summary that outlined the process and findings from that listening phase of this process. This evening's session is designed for you, and we're going to review the resolution in detail and provide an overview of the findings that the National Executive Committee used to craft this resolution. I know you've all heard about the process and the proposal itself, and now you're going to hear from those of us who actually put it together. Along the way tonight, should you want to submit questions, you can. Do that by sending an email to questions@scouting.org. Obviously, with about 1,000 people on the call, we can't promise to answer every question, but our team will capture it and try to make sure you get an answer. If you're a member of the working media and have questions, please send them to pr@scouting.org. We have a number of National Executive Committee members on the line with us today, as well as others who have supported this process. Specifically, we have Nathan Rosenberg, who's our Vice President of Marketing, Tom Buffenbarger, our Assistant Treasurer, Lyle Knight, our Vice President of Human Resources, and Wayne Brock, our Chief Scout Executive. All of these people are dedicated to the Scouting movement, and they're leaders in their fields and just members of people who have great wisdom and have shown tremendous dedication to the Scouting movement, and people who we all rely on and take great counsel from. But thanks again for being with us. In a few minutes, I'm going to turn it over to Nathan Rosenberg, who is our Vice President of Marketing, who will take us through the process and some of the data that led to the Executive Summary report and to the resolution's development itself. We'll specifically include some of the specifics of what the National Executive Committee was presented in the listening phase, and you'll be able to hear from some of the National Executive Committee meetings. This was not an easy decision, and before I turn it over to Nate, let me just add that this is an area that is very difficult. We're addressing this issue because it's a point of growing concern for many in the Scouting family. And you're going to see that no issue has evolved or moved across the American landscape as quickly as this one. Now, it's very important, I think, that you understand that the BSA does not have an agenda on the matter of sexual orientation. And trying to resolve this question for youth or families is not the role of Scouting. And we're not going to let any member or outside organization use their program to promote or any social political agenda within Scouting. It's just not what we're going to allow to happen. I want to remind you that America needs Scouting, and our policies must be based always on what's in the best interest of our kids. We all agree that one thing, people can reasonably disagree on this issue and still work together to serve kids and do great things for them. We have to stay focused on what unites us, and that when you hear what went on with the resolution, I think that you'll agree that like I do, that this preserves the virtues and core beliefs of Scouting. The proposed resolution was very important to us to reaffirm our commitment to the duty to God. This resolution also puts in place a behavior-based standard for youth, regardless of their sexual orientation, and it maintains our membership standards for adults. You'll hear about some of these specifics in a while. I want to close with some thoughts. This is not anyone's personal view that counts. It's not a vote on adult leaders. And while people can differ on this view significantly, What we found is that adults in the scouting community and teens and all others agreed that youth should not be denied the benefits of scouting. Our membership standards have always been about leadership, and it was never the intent, I believe, of this organization to prevent young people from being part of this organization. We all know this. Kids belong in the scouting program and are better off in the scouting program. Whatever happens with respect to the vote, we ask you to respect the opinions of others and continue to serve kids. Thank you for being with us this evening, and I look forward to seeing you all in May. And now I'm going to turn it over to Nathan Rosenberg.
Thanks, Wayne. First of all, good evening to everyone, and again, share with Wayne our gratitude for you taking time to be with us and to be part of this dialogue. Unfortunately, as Wayne said, with over 1,000 people on the telephone line, we won't be able to directly interact, but we will collect your questions and respond to them later on. As Wayne said, this is probably the most difficult undertaking, the most difficult question that we've ever dealt with, certainly in my experience, both professionally and personally. We came into the room as a group of officers, volunteers, just like most of you on this call. We listened to the data. We listened to what moms and dads of young scouts had to say. We listened to what scouts themselves had to say, what the American public had to say, what National Executive Board members, what National Advisory Board members, what people from our regions, from our areas, from virtually every council, as you'll hear in a little while, had to say on this issue. And after looking at all the data, after understanding all these views and checking our own hearts, and by the way, in that room, every point of view and every position was represented also. We came together unanimously to support this resolution, and we hope by the end of this evening you can support it also. In the end, the committee decided that this resolution is really the best option for scouting. I know that almost everybody on the call has had a chance to read the resolution, so we won't read through the whole thing, but I'd like to go through several key parts of the resolution. First is, whereas the Scout Oath begins with duty to God, and the Scout Law ends with the Scout's obligation to be reverent, and that will always remain a core value of the Boy Scouts of America, and the values set forth in the Scout Oath and law are fundamental to the BSA and central to teaching young people to make better choices over their lifetimes. And whereas numerous independent experts have recognized that the programs protecting Scouts today, which include effective screening, education and training, and clear policies to protect youth and provide for their privacy, are among the best in the youth-serving community. And whereas Scouting is a youth program, and any sexual conduct, whether homosexual or heterosexual, by youth of Scouting age is contrary to the virtues of Scouting. And whereas the Boy Scouts of America does not have an agenda on the matter of sexual orientation, and resolving this complex issue is not the role of the organization, nor may any member use Scouting to promote or advance any social or political position or agenda, and whereas youth are still developing, learning about themselves and who they are, developing their sense of right and wrong, and understanding their duty to God to live a moral life, and whereas the Boy Scouts of America will maintain the current membership policy for all adult leaders of the Boy Scouts of America, now, therefore be it resolved that no youth may be denied membership in the Boy Scouts of America on the basis of sexual orientation or preference alone. So let me just summarize, because there's several key points here. The first is that this resolution reaffirms the duty to God. Second, it says that there will be no change to our membership standards for adult leaders. And it emphasizes behavioral standards. All sexual activity among youth is contrary to the virtues of Scouting. It prohibits the use of Scouting for political and social advocacy. And finally, it ensures that young people are given a safe place to learn and grow in Scouting. Look, Wayne said this earlier, and it's a really important point. It was never the intent of our policy for the BSA to prevent young people from being part of this organization. And as Wayne pointed out, this process has been nothing but short of historical. Never before have we gathered so much information, so much input from so many different people as we have since February. I don't know that anyone has counted up the hours that has gone into this project, but it has to be in the hundreds of thousands. National Executive Committee member Terry Dunn and Central Region Director Al Lambert led the local council study group. They gathered feedback from all but 4 of our councils, all of the area committees, all the regional committees, and brought it together in a focus of this is what the view of scouting volunteers is. So now I'd like to introduce Al Lambert because Terry Dunn couldn't be with us tonight, but Al will share with you the findings of their committee.
Thank you, Nathan. I appreciate the opportunity. I'm happy to be here representing Terry Dunn and all the volunteers that participated in the various study groups over the course of time. We gathered a ton of information, as you've heard, from both inside and outside the scouting family. And I want to remind you about the context of that study. The first thing is that we asked everybody to take a look at the different, their opinion about the impact on scouting, their council, whatever it would be, in an environment of change versus no change. That's a tough task to do when you think about it. It was tough for our local council volunteers and our study groups to look at changing to what or not changing, but they took a look at it at change versus no change. Many of our councils, though, took a look at what the chartered partner option might take a look. So you have to kind of keep that in mind as we go through some of this information. So over the course of nearly 3 months, more than 200,000 BSA members and leaders participated in a Voice of the Scout survey, which you'll hear about shortly. A national survey captured the perceptions of 800 parents of boys under the age of 18. More than 1,000 teenagers from 16 to 18 participated in national surveys. 270 or more of our local councils provided various degrees of impact, and almost every council submitted some recommendations or input from their local councils. More than 100 religious and community organizations participated, and more than 50,000 BSA and alumni donors were involved in the study. So in a time frame prior to the April 17th Executive Committee meeting, the regions and the study groups and the committees all met, and they refined their recommendations to the Executive Committee. And in summary, all of these things showed that if we changed the policy, we would suffer some significant membership losses across America, 200 to 400,000 youth. We'd also see some more significant financial losses. We'd see leadership losses everywhere from our local units up to councils and areas and regions. And that we'd see some really big, major chartered partner losses if we changed at this point. When we looked at the impacts of no change, all of our study groups acknowledged that our membership losses would continue, that we wouldn't see an increase in membership, but they would continue, but they'd be smaller. We would still see financial loss and continued loss of corporate support. Our leadership losses would be smaller, in the 3 to 7% range, and we'd have a smaller impact on the loss of chartered partners. When we boiled it all down, you can see that just slightly over 50% of our councils recommended no change, 38% recommended change, and 11% were neutral or waiting to hear from their largest customers. Regionally, 3 regions recommended no change, Western, Central, and Southern, and 1 region recommended change on behalf of their councils and volunteers. I want to take this opportunity to thank the thousands of volunteers that mobilized on a minute's notice to take a good look at this process and to listen to the many voices out there in the scouting community. It's important that as many people have a voice as possible. So we want to thank all those volunteers. And now I'd like to introduce Dan Judy, Vice President of North Star Opinion Research, to review the findings of the very important Voice of the Scout and Harris studies. These studies will show you what our parents and teens in the scouting community think. Dan?
Thank you, Al, and thank you all for being on tonight. We appreciate you calling in to listen to some of the facts we've gathered on this issue. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the research that was done this year. There were 3 separate pieces to this. The first was a national survey of parents of boys under the age of 18. That was a telephone survey conducted by my firm. The second was a Harris Interactive Survey of Youth, which was an online survey of 1,000 teens aged 16 to 18. And then the Voice of the Scout Membership Standards Survey, which probably everybody watching this received and participated in. That received over 200,000 respondents, and it was BSA members and leaders at the unit, district, and council level. And that basically went on throughout the month of March and on into early April. Before I talk about those numbers, you're going to see some dramatically different results among those 3 groups. And one of the reasons is because of the demographic makeups of those groups. On the sorts of issues that we're talking about, demographics are key, particularly age. And if you look at gender, for example, parents are 55% female, teens are split 50-50, and the scouting community is 70% male. In terms of race, parents are 60% white with a mixture of other races with the other 40%. Teens are 51% white, but among the scouting community, those who gave us their race, 91% were white. And then comparing parents in the scouting community in terms of age, parents tend to be much younger. They're primarily in their 30s and 40s, whereas members of the scouting community are primarily in their 50s and 60s. So keep that in mind as you think, why are these numbers so different among these 3 groups? That helps sort of explain that. To sort of begin, before we get into the results of those surveys, I want to just a minute about the context, the broader context of this issue in the culture. And on no issue in American life have attitudes changed as much or as fast as they have on gay rights. The first slide here is that a majority of Americans believe gay and lesbian relations are morally acceptable. If you go back to 2001, just after President Bush was inaugurated the first time, people said that homosexual relations were morally wrong by 53 to 40%. Those lines crossed in 2008 when President Obama was elected the first time, and today, just 4 years later, those numbers have flipped. 54% say that gay relations are morally acceptable. 42% say they're morally wrong. A majority now also supports gay marriage, and this is an incredibly dramatic slide. Going back to 1996, people said that gay marriages should not be valid by a 68 to 27% margin. Those lines slowly closed in on one another as the years passed. They crossed last year, and now Americans support gay marriage 53 to 46%. The key variable on this issue, as we'll see on a lot of the other questions here, is age. Seniors are now the only age group that opposes gay marriage. Young voters, those age 18 to 29, support it by 2 to 1. Those 30 to 49 supported by 55 to 36%. Those 50 to 64 are basically split, but they now support it 44 to 43%. In a similar survey we did last year, that age group actually opposed gay marriage. So that has changed in just the last year. And then seniors oppose it, but only by 45 to 34%. So you're seeing a dramatic change on these issues primarily related to age. But unlike attitudes about gays and lesbians, attitudes about the Boy Scouts of America have remained constant, and it is one of the most admired organizations in the country. The organization is just breathtakingly popular among all adults. We've been polling, asking people if they had a favorable or unfavorable view of the Boy Scouts going back almost a decade. And as you can see, the numbers are virtually unchanged. It is 87 to 5% favorable in 2004. It's 86 to 6% favorable today. So the Scouts are just, they're an American icon, an American institution, and incredibly popular. The organization is also very popular among parents of boys. They today have a 78 to 11% favorable, unfavorable rating. that represents an increase in both the favorable and the unfavorable rating in the last 3 years. Most of that is due, I'm sure, to the news that the organization has gotten during that time period, but still just extremely popular. It's even more popular among parents of current Scouts. Among the parents in our survey who had a son who is in Scouts right now, they view the organization favorably by 95 to 3%. I would challenge any other organization to come up with a comparable number among their membership. Among former parents of former Scouts, also very popular, 86 favorable, 10% unfavorable. And then among parents of boys who have never been in Scouting, it's down a little bit, but mostly because they're less familiar with the organization, but still 73% favorable, 14% unfavorable. What this says is that the closer people are to Scouting, the more they love it. Now let's talk about views of this Boy Scout policy, which of course is why we're here. Views of the policy among parents and teens are very different from those in the Scouting community. Parents oppose the policy, as you'll see, 45% to 42%. Teens oppose it overwhelmingly, 57 to 23%. And the Scouting community, however, supports it by a wide margin, 61 to 34%. Now, this is the current policy as it stands today, not what they're talking about changing to. Intensity is balanced among parents, but strongly favors opposition among teens and support among members of the Scouting community. Now, intensity is important when you're talking about an emotional, ideological type issue like the one we're dealing with here. That's what motivates people, it's what drives people to make decisions, and so intensity matters. As you'll see among all parents, strong supporters basically equal strong opponents. You've got 32% strongly support versus 34% strongly oppose. Among teens, on the other hand, strong opposition outpaces strong support by more than 3 to 1. 38% strongly opposed, only 12% strongly supported. The exact opposite is true among members of the Scouting community, where intensity favors supporters by 2 to 1. So you'll see that strong support among the members of the Scouting community is at 54%. Strong opposition is just at 25%. Views among parents have changed dramatically in just the last 3 years. You'll remember the slides we showed at the beginning that showed how much change and how rapidly it's occurred on gay issues in America. That's true among parents of boys. We did an identical survey of parents of boys in 2010, same methodology, same sampling methods and everything. And at that time, just 3 years ago, parents supported the policy by a 2 to 1 margin. They supported it 58 to 29%. Today, as we saw earlier, they oppose it 45 to 42%. So this is just another striking example of how quickly public opinion has changed on these issues. Again, age is the critical variable. Parents under age 50 oppose the policy, and only those over age 50 support it. So you'll see the youngest parents are split. Those 30 to 39 oppose it by 2 points. Those 40 to 49 oppose it by 8 points. But then those over 50 continue to support the policy. As you'll see on this next slide, all but the youngest members of the Scouting community support the policy. So among the youngest people who participated in the Voice of the Scout survey, those age 18 to 24, they oppose the current policy 53 to 41%. But every other age group supports it. And as you'll see, once you get into middle-aged 40 to 45 range, those lines really start to diverge in favor of the supporters. So you go from 58 to 37% support among 40 to 44-year-olds. By the time you get to those who are over age 60, they support it by almost 3 to 1. Regionally, parents in 3 of the 4 regions oppose the policy. Now, if you think about how our country is divided ideologically regionally, this slide is going to make a lot of sense. Parents in the Northeast oppose the policy by 53 to 35% margin. Those in the Midwest oppose it 45 to 41%, and those in the West oppose it 53 to 36%. But those in the South continue to support it by a 50 to 38% margin. Now, before I go to this next slide, I want to point out something about the Western region. When you're talking about parents or voters or all adults, the western region is dominated by people who live in the Pacific Western states, so California, Oregon, Washington. When you're talking about the scouting community, it's disproportionate. The West is disproportionately represented by people in the Mountain West. That doesn't mean there aren't a lot of people in the Pacific West, but there are a lot more scouting people in those Mountain West states, the more culturally conservative states, than there are among voters or parents or adults overall. And that's why the scouting community supports the policy in 3 of the 4 regions of the country. The exception, as you would expect, is in the Northeast, where the scouting community opposes the policy by 51 to 42%. But in the central region, they support it 55 to 38. In the West, which again contains a disproportionate people in the Mountain West, supported by 69 to 26. And then in the South, of course, you have support by a wide 71 to 25% margin. 3 years ago, the policy was a net positive among parents. Today, it's a net negative. We asked, does knowing that the Boy Scouts of America have a policy prohibiting homosexuals from being scouts or adult scout leaders make you more likely to enroll your son in scouting, less likely to enroll your son in scouting, or does it have no effect on your decision? The dominant answer is no effect. But in 2010, parents said that that policy made them more likely to enroll their son by 2 to 1, 30 to 15%. Today, parents say that they would be less likely to enroll their son by a very slim margin. So there's been a lot of change on that as well. Now I want to talk a little bit about the scenarios that we tested. And most of you who conducted this survey, I'm sure, probably remember reading through some of these. We wrote these scenarios to be provocative and to ask people to think about really how this policy interacts in the real world, how a change would manifest itself in the real world, and to really sort of dig in. As Wayne and Nathan said, this is a very complicated and nuanced issue, and what we wanted to do is to have people really think about kind of what a change or no change might mean. And indeed, most of these scenarios involve real-world examples that have actually occurred in the Scouts, and most of them you probably recognize. The first one is unique and very important because it is the only question on this survey where we had total agreement among all 3 segments, where parents, teens, and the scouting community all agreed. And that is that it would be unacceptable to deny a gay scout the Eagle Award. The scenario is this. Tom started in scouting as a Tiger Cub at age 7 and finished every requirement for the Eagle Scout Award at age 16. At his board of review for the award, Tom reveals he is gay. Is it acceptable or unacceptable to deny Tom his Eagle Scout Award based on that information? Again, as you can see on this slide, overwhelming majorities of all groups believe that this would be unacceptable. And that really goes to the heart of what this resolution says, is that boys should not be denied the benefits of scouting. So you see parents 78 to 18%, teens 74 to 15%, and the scouting community 62 to 32%. So this is the one area where all 3 groups are in agreement. Moving on to the next scenario, the scouting community disagrees with parents and teens when it comes to a lesbian serving as a den mother. In this scenario, Johnny, a first-grade boy, has joined Tiger Cubs with his friends. Johnny's friends and their parents unanimously nominate Johnny's mom, who's known by them to be a lesbian, to be the den leader. Johnny's pack is chartered to a church where the doctrine of faith does not teach that homosexuality is wrong. Is it acceptable or unacceptable for Johnny's mother to serve as a den leader for his Cub Scout den? As you can see, parents and teens very similar on this. Parents say it's acceptable 63 to 32%, teens by an even wider 65 to 22%. The scouting community disagrees, but it's close. They say it's unacceptable, but by a very narrow 50 to 46% margin. The next scenario, a gay male Boy Scout troop leader, along with a heterosexual leader, is taking a group of teenage boys on a camping trip, following the Boy Scouts Youth Protection Guidelines, which require 2 adult leaders to be present with the Scouts at all times. Is it acceptable or unacceptable for the gay adult leader to take adolescent boys on an overnight camping trip? Again, parents say that this is acceptable, 58 to 37%. Teens agree by 52 to 32%. But the scouting community disagrees, not by an overwhelming margin, but by a decisive 54 to 42% margin. They say that that would be unacceptable. In the next scenario, a Boy Scout troop is chartered by an organization that does not believe homosexuality is wrong and allows gays to be ministers. The youth minister traditionally serves as the scoutmaster for the troop. The congregation hires a youth minister who is gay. Is it acceptable or unacceptable for this youth minister to serve as the scoutmaster? Parents say this is acceptable by 56 to 41%. Again, the margin among teens is even wider, 56 to 27%. But the scouting community disagrees, this time by a 15-point margin. They say that this would be unacceptable by a 55 to 40% margin for the gay scoutmaster to lead that troop. In the next scenario, Bob is 15 years old and the only openly gay scout in a Boy Scout troop. Is it acceptable or unacceptable for the troop leader to allow Bob to tent with a heterosexual boy on an overnight camping trip? Among parents, they say this would be acceptable, 54 to 39%. Again, a somewhat wider margin among teens at 56 to 26%. And then an overwhelming disagreement among the scouting community, who say that this would be unacceptable by a 63 to 29% margin. In the final scenario, David, a 16-year-old Boy Scout, believes that homosexuality is wrong. His troop is chartered to a church where the doctrine of that faith also teaches that homosexuality is wrong. Steve, an openly gay teen, applies to be a member in the troop and is denied membership. Is it acceptable or unacceptable for this troop to deny Steve membership? In this scenario, parents say that that would be unacceptable by a 55 to 38% margin. Teens, by just an overwhelming 64 to 22% margin, agree that that would be unacceptable. But members of the scouting community, again, disagree with the other two groups. They say that it would be acceptable to deny membership by 61 to 33%. So that's the scenarios. I want to talk for just a minute and wrap up here by talking about potential impact of the change. Now, when we conducted this research, we conducted research about changing to a charter partner option. What we found was that that was not popular. That's one of the reasons why a new resolution was discussed and crafted. The scouting community sees the current policy as a core value of the Boy Scouts of America. 58% of those who responded to the VOS survey said that the current policy of prohibiting open homosexuals is a core value found in the Scout Oath and Law. 42% said it was not. And in the final slide, that shows that a change does hold some downside among members of the scouting community. We asked if the Scouts make a decision on this policy that disagrees with your own view, will you continue to participate in the Boy Scouts or will you leave the organization? Among the whole scouting community, it's basically a wash. A third say that they could find a way to continue. A third say that they don't think that they could continue. And a third say that they're not sure. But what is especially interesting is looking at people who support the policy versus people who oppose it. And again, this goes back to the intensity of feeling on the issue that I talked about earlier. Among people who support the policy who are far more intense, 50% say they don't think they would be able to continue. Only 18% say they think they would be able to. On the other hand, among opponents of the policy, it's more of a shoulder shrug. Only 11% say if there was a decision made that disagreed with their view, they don't think they could continue. 53% think that they could. Now, it's important to remember, as I said before, that this question was asked in the context of a charter partner option, which again, we found was not popular. What we did find in this survey is that what all people agree on, the scouting community, parents, and teens, is that it would be wrong to deny a gay boy his Eagle Scout Award and thus deny him the benefits of scouting. And so that is the research, and I hope this has been helpful to you all. Thank you all for your participation in this process. With that, I will hand it back to Nathan.
Dan, thank you very much, and thanks for the great work that North Star does for us. Really appreciate it. Just again, everybody, this was the most extensive, the most in-depth, and the most comprehensive discussion that we have ever had on this issue. I have to tell you, well, none of us knew what the resolution would be going in. You know, just remember again that the local councils, the national board, the regional and area committees, as Al said, we're really looking at this in the context of should we change the policy or should we keep the policy the same. All the data and information that was gathered really with the intent of informing the executive committee so that we could draft a resolution that gave us the best way forward. And again, as I said, we came in with multiple views in that room. In the end, we thought there were probably 5 or 6 scenarios of different ways we could go. And unanimously, we support the one that we came up with because we do feel that it's the best for scouting. Probably, and this is just based on a few conversations that I've had with volunteers around the country, people were probably looking when they were talking about this in the local councils. I just finished up a little while ago as chairman. That's the term we use for the president of the Orange County Council. And in our own council, even people were thinking, well, it's either going to be local option or keep the policy as it is. And as you can tell, that's not where we came down because, again, like Dan just told you, pretty much across the board, from our charter partners to our membership, to the parents of our scouts, there just doesn't seem to be any choice for that. There should be a policy for the Boy Scouts of America as we've put forward in this resolution. 2 things were clear in this is that the local choice, that giving the charter partners the choice or giving local councils the choice would have created really a lot of confusion. And that was one of the most common comments we got in the Voice of the Scout survey, in the surveys of our board, and the regional and area committees. Secondly, almost everybody, and I mean, I looked through all the comments from the board, all the comments from the advisory council, and many of the other ones. Almost everybody's point of view is, we're here to serve kids. We should serve as many kids as we possibly can. So that's generally was the sense that I got from looking at the data. The last piece of information that led us to look specifically at the question of whether or not it's acceptable to deny a scout the Eagle Scout Award because he becomes gay. It turns out 239 of 285 councils, in those councils, more than 50% of the respondents found this scenario to be unacceptable. If you can look at the chart up on your screen right now, I mean, it's just overwhelmingly unacceptable to kick a boy out of scouting, basically, because of his sexual orientation. And that was true in every region of the country, by the way, also. Now the resolution's out, and we've heard from folks all over the country. People think this resolution has gone too far. Some people think the resolution should have gone farther to include the changing the standard for adult members. But please know this. As I said, we really did look at as many of the options as we can think of. We talked them through. Wayne Perry literally went around the table and every officer spoke on how he saw the best way forward for the Boy Scouts of America. As Wayne had said back in our meeting in February, all of us gave our personal views on the issue, but that's not what we talked about in April. In April, what we talked about was what was best for the Boy Scouts of America, what was best for the youth of America. We concluded that the option that didn't prevent a scout from participating in scouting, from getting the experience of this great life-changing program, they're the priority. Kids are our priority, period. And we all know the kids are much better off when they stay in scouting. Some people have said that we're changing our membership standards in response to pressure, to political pressure, to outside groups pressure, to donor pressure. And I'm on the committee and I'm engaged as anyone, and I'm going to be just blatantly clear with everybody on this call. It's not true. It's not true. What we responded to was the input of our members, what we heard from our members, and then we listened and listened really keenly, listened really generously, and decided to act. The membership policy that we've come up with, what's in the resolution with respect to youth, is a result of the dialogue within the scouting family. Scouting will not the board will not let any member or any outside organization pressure us to do anything that's not in the best interest of Scouting. We are not, let me say that a little bit differently. Our boys and the young girls, young women that we serve are not going to be political pawns. Some of you may said you didn't listen to me and you didn't listen to my point of view. And look, we talked to almost 500,000 people, and we listened really keenly to them. And I promise you, we heard your view. I'd like to introduce a couple of my fellow executive committee members. First, I'd like to introduce Lyle Knight. Lyle is the Vice President for Human Resources on the National Executive Committee. And Lyle, please.
Well, thank you, Nate. Boy, you and Al and Dan have done a wonderful job of explaining this process and the resolution. There's not a lot for me to add. But I was thinking just today before this phone call, I'm a voting delegate just like everyone else on the line. And I've been a regional level volunteer for at least 25 years. I can't think of anything as significant as this vote that's ever taken place in my career in Scouting. So I have great empathy not only for the other voting members, but for myself as well, because this is really a watershed issue that we're weighing in on. Let me give you my view, just a thumbnail, if I may, of this last meeting where the resolution was actually crafted. Because everyone at the table had previously expressed their personal opinions and their personal desires. But at this meeting, it wasn't necessary, because we already knew how each other felt. Everyone had their hat, their Scouting hat on, and all of the dialogue centered on what's best for Scouting. How do we deliver to more kids? How do we grow this great movement that we're blessed to be a part of? I was really touched by that, and I was also touched by the great respect that each person had for the other's opinion and the other's view of these scenarios that were presented to us. We had great scenarios that we vetted and we talked about the pros and cons. There was great concern expressed about the movement, the Scouting movement, about the kids, about the chartered partners. I mean, we went as far as to even talk about what was best for America. So I would assure everyone on this call, whatever your personal opinion is, someone at that table shared that opinion. But at this last meeting, we talked only about what was best for Scouting. Now, I personally support this resolution, although I've already been told it didn't go far enough, and I've also been told it went too far. But for today, just today, I think it's the right move, because we lacked consensus on any of the issues other than the youth issue. It's the only one that we had enough people that we could line up behind and get a clear consensus. Early in the process, our former national president, Rex Tillerson, said, I want you all to get on the train with me. And I don't know where this train is going, but I want us all to stay on the train, and I want us to all get off the train together wherever it stops, because we must hold the volunteers together if we're going to hold this movement together, and this is a very decisive point. Well, that was really sound wisdom and advice for all of us, and I thought about that often as we were looking for consensus. But let me wrap up just by saying I read on a website just in the last few days a statement made by one of our major chartered partners. I'm going to take just a moment, assuming that all of you have not read this statement. I'm going to read it to you. It's only about a page long, so please bear with me. For 100 years, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has enjoyed a strong, rewarding relationship with the Boy Scouts of America. Recently, BSA has been reviewing a possible policy change in its standards for membership and leadership. Now that the BSA has finished its review process and has proposed a resolution for consideration, the Church has issued the following statement. Over the past several weeks, BSA has undertaken the difficult task of reviewing its membership standards policy. In other words, this undertaking has been the most comprehensive listening exercise in its history. While the church has not launched any campaign either to effect or prevent a policy change, we have followed the discussions and are satisfied that BSA has made a thoughtful, good faith effort to address issues that, as they have said, remain among the most complex and challenging issues facing BSA and society today. The current BSA proposal constructively addresses a number of important issues that have been part of the ongoing dialogue, including consistent standards for all BSA partners, recognition that scouting exists to serve and benefit youth rather than scout leaders, a single standard of moral purity for youth in the program, and a renewed emphasis for scouts to honor their duty to God. We are grateful to BSA for their careful consideration on these issues. We appreciate the positive things contained in this current proposal that will help build and strengthen the moral character and leadership skills of youth as we work together in the future. So at least one of our major chartered partners has come out publicly complimenting us for this process and for the resolution. Back to you, Nate.
Thanks, Lyle. By the way, since Lyle brought it up, some have asked if a chartered organization will have the option not to allow a gay youth member in the program. Keep in mind that sexual activity among youth members is not allowed. But the policy clearly states youth who say they have a same-sex attraction cannot be removed for that reason alone. Finally, some have said that this runs counter to the values of scouting. I have to tell you, our committee reviewed a variety of policy options. I've said that several times already. Not just chartered organization choice, not just the youth option. And we did it with a commitment to staying true to the values of scouting. We did it with staying true to a commitment to providing a place to belong for kids to providing a place where kids could belong while they learn to grow. And the resolution reaffirms scouting's values and virtues. Some people have raised a question about what will happen when a youth turns 18. As in society where different standards and expectations exist once a young person reaches the age of 18, this resolution rightly recognizes that there is a difference between kids and adults and is reflective of the religious programs of most of our major religious charter organizations. By the way, in our programs where young people are still considered to be kids until they're 21. The policy will apply until they're 21. So we know we're hearing a lot from a lot of places, and one of the reasons why we're doing this call tonight, why we're doing this webcast tonight, is so that you can really understand what's going on. And each week, in addition to all this, you'll receive an email from us also. First of all, again, I want to thank Lyle. Lyle and I have worked in the Western region together, and he's just a wonderful man, and someday I'm going to have a voice like his, I hope. But next, I'd like to introduce Tom Buffenbarger. Tom is the Assistant Treasurer of the Boy Scouts of America, a member of the National Executive Committee, and hails from the Northeast region. Tom?
Thank you, Nathan. I want to thank you and Lyle for a great lead-in to this. My comments are going to be directed in a little different way. As a lifelong scouter, I've always endeavored to apply the lessons of my scouting experience to the world I find I live in today. And that brings to mind the Boy Scout motto, be prepared. Life is full of changes, and change never stops. And we must be prepared to accept the challenges a changing society can bring upon us. We prepared by listening, dialoguing, and acting. The issues before us as dedicated supporters and participants in scouting is certainly a serious and compelling challenge. The resolution Nathan presented earlier requires all of us to think about the organization we love, not just for the present day, but consider as well all of the tomorrows to come and what role will the Boy Scouts of America be. Countless hours and resources and passionate soul-searching by a ton of people. All scouting participants and supporters were given to this process, resulting in the resolution we've discussed this evening. After exhaustive debate among the entire realm of scouting and personal introspection from all, I firmly believe the resolution as proposed is the correct approach as the BSA navigates toward the future. Change is never easy. And I reflected back on my day as a scout. I was taught by a great scoutmaster that we can resist change, we can fear it, flee from it, deny it, hide from it, or we can recognize it, and when it is upon us, study it, challenge it, mold it, shape it, and in the end, make it work for us. Mastering change requires all of us to practice the 10th point of the Scout Law, to be brave, and to go forward the best we're able. That's where we're at this point in time in the life of the Boy Scouts of America. I compliment all those who worked very hard to craft this resolution. And as Lyle and Nathan and others have said, it means much more one way to others than it does, and I don't know any better compromise than what we have put forward. So I look forward to seeing everybody in May, and the owners of the Boy Scouts of America will weigh in. It's their time and it's their role, and set this organization on its course. Thanks, Nathan.
Tom, thank you. And Tom, thanks for your many years both on the board as well as on the executive committee. Listening to Tom just reminded me of one other thing. In our February meeting, I think our original intent really as an executive committee was to go to the board of directors with a resolution and to have the board of directors vote. And Tom said, trust the members. Tom's somebody who knows a lot about members. And I've heard sniping from the sidelines that the executive committee didn't provide the leadership, the board didn't provide leadership, the key three didn't provide leadership. And I'd like you to consider another point of view. I'd like you to consider this listening campaign, this bringing the members of the National Council into the process and giving them voice. I mean, I don't know about you, I've been to many national meetings, and as a member of the National Council, I felt like some of our elections had all the trappings of democracy of a Politburo vote. And this time we wanted to come to our members, and we wanted to talk to our members, to listen to our members, to be in a dialogue with our members and let our members choose. And so I go back to Tom's touchstone of trust the members. I got a couple questions that came in. Actually, we got a lot of questions that came in, and what we've been doing is clumping them together. And I think we've got some that really should be answered. This one we got into a little bit, but I'd like to expand on it. What do you say to people who believe this runs counter to their values? This runs counter to traditional Judeo-Christian values. We understand that youth are still developing, but we believe that sexual conduct by any scout is contrary to the virtues of scouting. And we also believe that this policy remains true to scouting's mission. It remains true to the virtues, the core principles of scouting, not of any one religion, but of scouting. And it's at the same time, it's got some harmony. It's reflective of our major religious chartered organizations' beliefs. Another question we got is, what do you say to people, let me read this again. What do you say to people who don't think this is inclusive enough and are going to vote no? Okay, that's a pretty good question. Well, first of all, again, if you studied all the responses, if you listen to what Al shared with you about where our membership is, and Dan with the Voice of the Scout survey, there's no policy that anybody can come up with that's going to accommodate all those views. And we realize that some people wish that this proposal would have included changing the standards for adult members. You know, I've heard from folks in California and folks on the East Coast who wish that we just got rid of any policy with regard to sexuality. But I'd ask you to consider why we exist, our mission, and that's to prepare young people. I'm probably going to say this too black and white, and I'll get 100 emails about this, but scouting doesn't exist to give you and me a place to volunteer. Scouting exists to serve young people, to serve boys, young men, and young women, to help them develop into great citizens for our country. So the proposal gives kids who sincerely want to be part of scouting a place to belong while they learn and grow. And I say it again, kids are better off in scouting. Okay, will local charter organizations be able to deny membership to youth based on sexual orientation? Okay, I think I covered this one. But look, if the resolution is passed, no youth may be denied membership in the Boy Scouts of America on the basis of sexual orientation or sexual preference alone. But it also states that we expect appropriate behavior regardless of sexual orientation. That obviously applies for adults also. Okay, and then, okay, it's just a little bit of a statement in this one as well as a question. This is a boy-led program. Aren't two standards hypocritical? No. As most of our religious chartered organizations realizing, scouting has always recognized there's a difference between kids and adults. We understand youth are still developing, but we believe sexual conduct by any scout is contrary to the virtues of scouting. Now said that about 6 times, I think. All right, let's see. Oh, good, this is a great one. Have you thought about implementation? Things like sleeping arrangements, youth protection policies, youth to adult transition. Tom said, be prepared. Well, we're ahead on this. We actually have a task force working on how we would go about implementing. We also have a group looking at what will happen if the resolution doesn't pass. So there's no conclusion here. There's no assuming one way or the other. So let me say this first. Scouting can do this, and we're already equipped to address the issues. But yes, we've created an implementation task force to make sure we're ready should the resolution pass. And by the way, one of the things that task force is looking at is how other organizations have dealt with these issues. And by the way, including Exploring, whereas you probably know there is no membership standard about sexual preference in Exploring. We chose the effective date of January 1st, 2014. So again, the effective date, if the resolution passes, is January 1st, 2014, to give us the time we need to make sure we're operationally ready for the policy. And then, no, I got 2 more, sorry. Next to last, will other resolutions be presented for a vote? Okay, so regarding the policy, as I said, there's about 5 unique options. The executive committee considered them all, drafted this resolution because it unanimously believes it's the best resolution. We'll deal with other resolutions as directed by our bylaws, but there's no plans to vote on any other resolution in this meeting. So again, like many of you, I've been to many, many national meetings. My experience is every time a resolution's been proposed, it's been referred to the Resolutions Committee. The Resolutions Committee has then either tabled the motion or referred the motion to another committee for study, for presentation at the following national meeting. That's the precedent here, gang, and I suspect that'll be the case on this. I'm not the chairman of the Resolutions Committee. I'll leave it up to him to figure out how to handle it, but I want to be honest with everybody, that has been the case in the past. And then our last question, a scouter from the Northeast region writes, the Northeast region wants to know if we object to the current policy, should we vote no in protest or yes in hopes of a change? Okay, well, my answer is vote yes. Look, again, this is not about you and me. This is not about our beliefs. This is not about our values or our preferences. This is about what's best for the youth of America. And we believe that this is in the best interest of scouting and of the youth of America. Okay, so a couple last things. a quick reminder, if you have questions about the voting process or your registration, remember, you must register as a voter, as a member of the National Council, in addition to registering for the national meeting if you're attending the national meeting. So please email council, is it up there? Yeah. council.operations@scouting.org. So if you look at the first line, if you get a pen and pencil real quick, council.operations@scouting.org. They can give you answer your questions about voting. And within a week, you'll be receiving, like I said, another email from us. In fact, plan on receiving an email pretty much once a week over the next 4 weeks with additional material, with updates. And to find out other information related to the vote, visit the membership standards webpage, and that's on scouting.org. There's a drag down that you can click on to get to the membership standards webpage. Now, to close our discussion, I'd like to introduce my friend Wayne Brock, our Chief Scout Executive.
Okay. Thank you very much, Nathan.
You're welcome, Chief.
And we're so glad that you chose Scouting as one of those places to volunteer.
Thank you, sir.
I really do. And I want to thank the other executive committee members who participated on this call tonight, the other Wayne, to Lyle and to Tom, and to everyone who has really helped be a part of this historic effort for the Boy Scouts of America. Like many of you, I'm a product of this great movement. I started as a Cub Scout when my dad took me across the street to Mrs. Woodard's house to join the Cub Scouts when I was 8 years old. And I tell you, that decision that he made for me, it was one of the best decisions that had one of the biggest impacts on shaping my life. I was very active in scouting. I worked on camp staff, I was in Order of the Arrow, and I achieved the rank of Eagle. Clearly, I can credit a great deal of who I am today to scouting. And I know that many of you have a similar story that you could share. Throughout my life, I have believed, because of what I learned in scouting, that people of goodwill can agree to disagree on important issues and still stand united. Scouting's like a family. Families argue and disagree sometimes. But at the end of the day, we all gather together around the campfire, stand together for character, leadership, and the youth of America. We all love this movement, and we're all in this together. The burden of this decision is heavy. It's historic. I know that, and so does our National Executive Committee and the Executive Board. And finally, I just want to say thank you for your service and for your input and leadership and all that you do for the youth of this nation. Thank you.
Wayne, thanks a lot. That was great. Well, we had about 500 folks on the call tonight, and we really appreciate your participation. So thanks to each and every one of you from taking time from work, from family, from friends, to invest in scouting. It's only 3 hours a week, as we all know. And, you know, we just appreciate your leadership. We appreciate your commitment to scouting. We look forward to seeing you in May. And as Rex said, we hope all of us stay on the bus together, regardless of the outcome of the vote in May. God bless each and every one of you, and God bless the United States, and God bless the Boy Scouts of America. Good night, everybody. Thanks for being here. See you in May.